Awesome. I'm Paige. I'm an addict, and I'm so incredibly grateful to be here with you guys today. And yeah, Jason put it in the chat. Grab your big books. We're going to be doing a big book bounce around. And if you don't have your book to hand, don't worry. I'm gonna read things out of it. So like, don't stress. I'm not going to be like, as it says on page something something, and then just not read it. I'll read it. And so where we're going to pick up is what we read today, which if you're in your book, it's the bottom of page 25. And it says, if you're seriously alcoholic as we were. I don't know about you, but when I came to the rooms, I was kind of hoping I wasn't as seriously alcoholic or seriously addict as you were, and I would do this thing. And I'm sure it's this thing that you lovely, wonderful people in Inverness or the Canadian imports who just joined us today would never, ever, ever do. It's called judging the speaker. And it's a thing that I would do because I would sit in a room like this and hear somebody like me natter on. And I think, man, I'm way worse than that gal. This thing couldn't help me. And the very next person who would share, I'd think, whoa, I'm not as bad as that guy. This thing couldn't help me. And I would look for all the ways I wasn't like you. And I would look for all the ways I didn't belong. And it says we were in a position where life was becoming impossible. In that line, I'm like, man, how did they know? See, my life was feeling impossible when I was drinking and when I was using, but my life was also feeling impossible when I was sober. I just didn't know what to do anymore, and I was beginning to come to the end of myself. And it says that if we have passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, that doesn't sound like good news. We had but two alternatives. Two. One was to go into the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other, to accept spiritual help. Again, those do not look like good options. I don't know about you. I'm here hoping that I got some diet alcoholism, some addiction light, so I can find an option C. So what I got to do is I got to figure out if I am as seriously alcoholic or as seriously addicted as you were, because I got to find out whether or not that's my choice, whether or not that's where I'm at. And where would I go? Where would I find that out? Well, let's not bounce around too far. Let's go to the bottom of page 24. Very bottom of page 24, just across the page, it says, when this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. Now, it's said on bottom page 25 that if I'm as seriously alcoholic as you are, I'm in that region from which there is no return through human aid. So I got to see, what are these two symptoms that somebody who has this illness has? Well, let's find out, what does it mean to be an individual with alcoholic tendencies, an individual with addict tendencies? If you want to bounce around in your book, we can bounce around to page XXX. And it's right after the 5 different types of drinkers. It says, we're in the doctor's opinion. We're going to rock and roll, but don't lose your spot because we're going to come back to page 24. And see, bottom of XXX, right after the 5 types of drinkers, it says all these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. What is my experience? Well, my experience is once I take anything, and I really do mean anything, mind altering, there's something that happens to me that does not happen to non-addicts, non-alcoholics. And I'll be frank. The first thing that happens to me that does not happen to non-addicts, non-alcoholics is this. It is peace. It is ease. It is comfort. To misquote a part of our book, a new world comes into view. It's my soul. Finally, that hole in the depth of my soul finally feels filled. The screaming from the depth of my gut finally stops. I'm okay and I have a solution. Now, that's not really what we're talking about. See, we're talking about that phenomenon of craving. See, I pick up, I use, I take that first hit, I take that first hoot, I take that first pill, I take that first drink, and I get that. But something inside of me, in the back of my head, it flips off like a switch. I always love speaking on Zoom because I got a prop. I got a little switch. And it flips off like a switch, and it tells me more. And the more that I drink or the more that I use, the louder that more gets. See, I take that first, and that first insists on a second. And that second will not relent until I've had 4. And 4 will just scream at me and bellow to me until I've had 8. And 8 will not relent until I've had 16, and so on and so forth. See, I start using, and the more that I use, the more that I need to use. And nothing becomes as important as that next hit, that next hoot, that next drink, that next pill, that next fix. I need that next one far more than I needed that first. And as a result of drinking and using in that way, I burn my life to the ground. I can't control the amount that I take, and I hurt myself, and I hurt the ones that I love. And I think, a little bit of self-awareness in this addict, I think that maybe, just maybe, the drugs and alcohol might have something to do with it. And so that is what it means to be an individual with alcoholic tendencies. An individual with the tendencies of an addict is lack of control once I start. Shoot, that's me. Bottom of page 24, it says, when this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies. So what is the thinking that we're talking about? Well, what that thinking looks like, and we're going to see it at the top of page 24 in italics. I know it bounces around a lot. But on page 24, what it talks about is what happens to me is I come to the end of myself, and I come to the end of me saying, that's it. I don't ever want to do it again. And the kicker is, for somebody like me, every single time I said, I don't want to do it again, I meant it. Every single time I swore off forever, I meant it. I did not want to do it again. I did not want to hurt the ones that I love. I did not want to destroy my family. But that had no effect. It says the fact is, not theory, not hope. That's the opposite of a hope, not wish. The fact is that most alcoholics, most addicts, for reasons yet obscure, we do not know why, have lost the power of choice in drink. I do not have the ability to choose whether I will pick up or not. And that is a frightening prospect. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We're unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory and the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against that first drink or drug. What does that look like in my own experience? What that looks like is, after I've said, that's it, I'm never going to do it again, a day, a week, a month, several months down the line, I get a thought. And that thought happens in my mind, and that thought happens when I am as sober as I am today, but my illness is untreated. And that thought looks a little something like, this time will be different. Looks a little something like, nobody will ever know. It looks a little something like, I'm going to go out for 3 drinks. My problem was crack. I can drink like a lady. It looks a little something like, I'm going to go out for, $30 worth of crack. My problem is alcohol, but I can smoke crack like a lady. If you're wondering, I have never done anything like a lady. Actually, I'll talk about that here in a sec. It looks like, man, if you're feeling the way that I was feeling, you'd have to get loaded too. It looks like my problem is I'm using with those Canadians. But I'm in Inverness. It's going to be a different situation here. You know what I mean? It looks like I'm going to kill myself anyway, so why don't I get loaded? It looks like, man, I was blowing that whole thing out of proportion. I think I can go out this week. And so that is what it looks like. And when it talks, that paragraph is telling me I am unable to play the tape to the end. Anyone ever here play the tape to the end? Man, that does not work. I try to play the tape to the end. It'll work for a little bit, but it's a little like a parachute or a fire extinguisher. You know what I mean? I need one of those that is going to be 100% effective, because it is the time that doesn't work that matters. And you see, I try to play to the tape to the end. Do you know what happens to me when I'm playing the tape to the end? I'm not thinking about the pain, the degradation, the suffering. I can for a little bit, but inevitably that insane thought is going to win. What's going to happen is, I imagine that I'm sitting on a piano. I'm in a red sequin evening gown. Never in my life have I worn that, ever. And I've got those long, classy gloves. And I've got, the chandelier and a candelabra. And, I've got a glass of Chardonnay or champagne, something fancy. And I got those real long cigarette holders. But instead of a cigarette, I got a crack pipe, and I'm going to have a hoot. You know what I mean? I am a classy bro. What's the reality? I'm pissing my pants behind a dumpster smoking crack with the guy I just met. You know what I mean? That's the reality, but I cannot see it. I cannot think. think through the drink. I can't play the tape to the end. I am without defense. I do not have a choice whether I will relapse or not. The reality is, if I have this illness, I will relapse if my illness is untreated. So that brings me back to the bottom of page 24, when this sort of thinking, have I had any experiences when I said I did not want to do it again, and I did it again? That is that sort of thinking. And it says, when that is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, have I had any experience where once I started, I could not control the amount that I took and I burnt it to the ground? Then that's me. And it says that I have probably placed myself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. That's not good news. Let's pop over to the bottom of page 25. If you were seriously alcoholic as we were, if you were seriously addicted as we were, and it sounds like I might be, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. Man, that's not good news. I'll be honest with you guys. I was for a middle of the road solution. I was telling you, I was kind of hoping I had the, diet version of this thing, that I didn't have to do all the things that you had done. I'll be honest, I was kind of hoping I could just hang out in some meetings and talk about myself. My favorite subject, but also my least favorite subject. Please don't ask questions that I don't have the answer to, like, how's it going? You know what I mean? But the reality is that I have this illness. And if I have this illness, I have passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid. And I've tried, I'll be honest with you guys, I tried a lot of the things that there are to try for human aid, but I did not try everything. But my experiences, everything that I tried failed. I could not stay sober. I could not stay free from suicidal ideation. That was my experience. I was beyond human aid, and that sounds like me. If I have passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had two alternatives. Two, and only two. It's a pretty black and white situation. See, if I don't have this illness, I've got options. I've got choices. There's a lot of things that I can do, but if I have this illness as it's laid out in this book, I've got two choices. And it says one was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other to accept spiritual help. And I want you to know that was a tough choice. You know what I mean? I was kind of like, listen, how bad is that whole intolerable situation going to be? You know what I mean? And I was like, I don't know, how much of the spiritual help do I have to do? It was a tough choice. But what got me there? You know what I mean? What got me there is I came to the end of myself. And you see, the reality is I got two options and I got two choices. Go on to the bitter ends or accept spiritual help. Dive into this work and this way of life like my life depends on it, because it does. But the reality is if I do not actively and intentionally choose to accept spiritual help, if I do not dive into this work and this way of life like my life depends on it, it does. What that means is I have chosen the addict death. I've chosen the alcoholic death. I have chosen to go on to the bitter ends, whether I like it or not, whether I believe it or not, whether I think so or not. That is the reality. I've got two options. And so let's pop up to the top of page 25. It says, there is a solution. We have one. And depending on the room that I'm in, I feel like I got to emphasize different things. Sometimes I got to emphasize a solution, and we're going to talk about what that solution is here in a little bit. But regardless of what room I'm in, I always want to emphasize there is a solution. We have one. We have one here in Cocaine Anonymous. Whether you are new to this thing, whether you've been in and out of this thing for years, we have one. Whether you've been around here a little while and the magic is gone, and you start having those problems, it feels like they're piling up and piling up and piling up. What I want you to know is we have a solution. And here's the thing, is the book is going to meet us where we're at and take us where we need to go. It says almost none of us liked the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for successful consummation. You know what that's saying? That's saying almost none of us liked the steps. Almost none of us thought they were a good idea. Almost none of us were jazzercise to be doing them. Like, when I got here, I would do this thing, and I'm sure you lovely, wonderful people would never do it. It's called auditing the steps. It's very different than doing the steps, very different than taking the steps, very different than even talking about the steps, pontificating about the steps, chanting the steps. No. It is where you look at the steps on the wall or being shared on the Zoom screen, and you do that thing. I'm sure you guys can't relate to this, but you think that one, not that one, some of that one. Ew, gross. Amends to my acts? No, thank you. None of that. Prayer and meditation? No, thank you. Helping others? Sure. You know what I mean? It's that where I pick and choose. But the reality is the book is going to meet us where we're at. This is good news. You see, the 12 steps are the actions that I need to take to allow me to have a spiritual awakening. That is our solution in Cocaine Anonymous. And it's good news, because did you know that liking the steps, not being afraid of the steps, not feeling worthy of the steps, not feeling deserving of the steps, not thinking that they're going to work for you, not having good motives, that none of those are prerequisites for taking the steps. And none of that matters. What matters, though, this is the bad news, is that I take them, is that I do them, is I follow the clear-cut directions. It's like when you hear the title of the movie. But what matters is that I follow these clear-cut directions. Because if I do not take them, I will not get that experience. And if I don't get that experience, I will drink and I will use. It's not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. And here is why. Here is why I dive in and take these steps. It says, but we saw that it really worked in others. And we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. That's why. I got two reasons. One is that coming to the end of myself. I came to the end of my good ideas, my plans, my grand schemes and designs. I was done. There was nothing more that I could do. I had come to the end of myself. And you see, that's addiction's job. That's alcoholism's job. To beat me into a state of reasonableness. To get me to the end of myself. You know, in the 12 and 12 in Tradition 9, I believe it talks about great love and great suffering. Great love, great pain. Those are our only disciplinarians. We need no other. Great pain and great suffering. That is the job of the illness of addiction. But what is my job as a recovered member is great love. And it talks about that here. But when we saw that it really worked in others, my job is nothing less than to be a demonstration of this program, a demonstration of the power that is God that I didn't like and I didn't believe in and I was super resentful towards when I got here. That is my job. My job is to shine bright with a light, that my deportment shouts that I have an answer that is not my own, an answer that came as the result of these actions. That is my responsibility to you, no more, no less. And it says, when therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, recovered. I'm not cured of this illness, but solved. And depending on how I do for time, I don't know. We'll go to those 10-step promises and we'll talk about solved. We'll talk about recovery. It says, when we have been approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up this simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. What is that? These 12 steps taken out of this book. Those are the simple kit of spiritual tools. That's what I need to take to get me from that place of hopelessness to that place of hope, accepting spiritual help. And it says we've found much of heaven and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. Rocketed. And what I want to say is it does not take long to get well here in Cocaine Anonymous. It does not take long to have a spiritual awakening, a spiritual experience, to be a recovered member. It does not take long. It does not take long when you are new. It does not take long if you've been in and out, or it does not take long if the magic is gone and those problems are piling up. It does not take long. And our job is to help you find that. So if you have not had that experience, please let us help you. And know that we get rocketed. The last time we saw the fourth dimension in this book in chronological order, what we were talking about, it was catapulted. Now we got some like engine burners on this thing. We got some rocket fuel. We're going to get rocketed. That does not sound like sit and rest and take your time. No, dive into this thing, and I promise it's worth it. But what is the fourth dimension of existence? We're not talking about tripping on some, wacky drugs in a weird guy's van. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a spiritual awakening. And this is what a spiritual awakening looks like. Let's go down to the next paragraph, the great fact. And this is our solution. And it is the great fact, not theory, not wish, not hope, not maybe, not keep coming back and something might rub off. No, this is the great fact for us, this and nothing less. This is some strong language. They're not mincing their words. It says that we have had, and that is our experience, that we have had here at this meeting, deep and effective spiritual experiences. I needed one of those or I was going to use again. And it says, and this is what a spiritual experience looks like. It says that which has revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The way in which I show up, the way in which I look at life, my fellows, and this whole universe has radically and completely changed. I have changed. And it says the central fact, not an over there maybe sort of God, no, but the central fact that the very center and fact, not theory, not wish, not maybe, not could be, fact is this. It says the central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our capital C Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. There's two ways to read that. The other way is that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives as in one of the places in which my Creator resides is deep within my heart. And it says He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. You know what I could never do by myself? Permanent, contented sobriety. Could never do that. And so much more. Not once did I sell the power of alcohol short. Not once did I sell the power of crack short. Not once did I sell the power of any mind-altering substance short. So I'm reminded never to sell the power of God in these 12 steps short. But if you're new and you're like, man, I don't know about all this God's talk. Well, let's go have a look at another description of what a spiritual awakening looks like. Now we're going to contrast it with what's said on page 24. We go across the page. It's talking about, and I'm just going to summarize it real quick. It's talking about the consequences that don't crowd into the mind to deter us. It's like I'm putting my hand on the hot stove because I've got no defense. This time it'll be different, so here's how. The stove was hot in Canada, but I'm across the pond. It can't be hot here. My problem was that it was a gas stove, but this stove is electric. I cannot stop myself from touching the hot stove. Now let's pop over to page 84. And what we're going to read are what's called the step 10 promises. We're going to go to the very bottom of the page. It's right below the line, love and tolerance of others is our call. It says, and we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol, even drugs. I'm not fighting this thing anymore. For by this time, sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. Page 24, step 1, I can't stop myself from touching the hot stove. Page 84, I know it's hot, and I don't want to touch it. We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We'll see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. See, the third step, when I'm standing at that turning point, where am I going to go? Alcoholic, that spiritual way of life. I don't know if God is going to care for me. But anytime I see a promise in this book, and deeper than that, anytime I experience a promise in this book, it becomes evidence of God's care. Position of neutrality, safe and protected, that is cared for. Because we have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. And I mean, this is not, I took some actions I did not want to take. I did some things I didn't want to do. And the change happened to me. I received the gift that is on offer. It says it does not exist for us. We are neither cocky nor are we afraid. That is our experience, and that is how we react so long as we keep in fit spiritual condition. See, I got to do this work with my life. My life depends on it. And then I got to continue to grow this experience. I don't know about you. Maybe we're a little different. I have a feeling we're not. I couldn't stay well on one drink. I couldn't stay well on one hoot. I couldn't stay well on one pill. I can't stay well on one experience. I get to continue to grow this thing and have more experiences. And if this has not happened for you, what I'll end on is please let us help you. Our very lives depend on it. Thank you for the opportunity to share.